Alright guys, so kind of obvious, I'm in my kayak right now, doing a little scouting. I put a camera out here, I want to say it was over 2 weeks ago, and it's basically, there's like a, I'll show you better when we get in there, but there's like this long peninsula that comes out, and there's like this little sandbar that like wraps around the slough. And I noticed, so my buddy Branch and I came in here a year ago, or it was last January actually, so, and we found buck beds in the slough. Well, I came in here to go scout it out, maybe hang up a camera. Ended up hanging up a camera there, but the slough that the beds were in was flooded. So there's still a lot of deer using the little peninsula. I think there's a deer taking off through the woods right now. Huh. Either way, let's get in there. Just swapped out that SD card, camera's right there. And basically right here in front of me, it's like this little opening, and back that direction, I don't know, it's probably only about 100 yards or so. There is like some really thick pines, and I feel like a lot of those deer are bedding in those thick pines and coming out here and feeding on acorns all through here. And then there's, across this peninsula, there is a ton of acorns dropping. But you can kind of see it opens up right here. There's a strip open. Right down in here is where those beds we found were. And they were all rubbed up and messy. It looked like a bachelor group. And none of this is super fresh. It literally just got done raining. But just a few minutes ago, or before the rain, that's a giant track. I mean, that's my foot up next to it. And granted, it is sand and all, but I mean, it came from right where my camera is. I would really like to do some scouting, and I brought another camera out. I'm not wearing boots, and I just recently learned, or heard a guy talking about how big the cane breaks get down here and how prevalent they are. Which, I mean, the only venomous snake I've ever seen out here was a cottonmouth, and I've spent a lot of time out here. So maybe I'm just stepping over cane breaks all the time, but I haven't got bit yet, so I'm not super worried about it. But when somebody says something like that, it gets in your mind. It looks like there's some turtles nesting right here. This is right off the bank of the river. A little cow ant down in that hole. But it looks like there's a recent turtle hatch. That's pretty cool. So real quick, I wanted to kind of mention some things that I look for out in the swamps. Granted, last year was terrible. I started figuring out the deer in the rut, which granted it was the rut, and it's kind of subjective as to how you view the rut. A lot of people assume that the deer are just running wild, which for the most part they are. There is some truth to that, but if you're not in the right spot, you're just not in the right spot. But I lost my train of thought. But anyway, so this spot, there's like a really hard edge. Obviously, we found beds, so that's a major plus. Which granted, that's not gonna help us kill deer unless we can know that they're in there and sneak in close enough to get them up out of the beds before they're ready. And I mean, there's no active bed there right now that I could tell. But it's a nice edge that's not far from thick pines, and there's a ton of oaks dropping in there. So it makes sense for there to be deer there. And we saw a ton of tracks. This spot, it's a certain amount, like there's a decent chunk that you can only get to from a boat, which is why I have the kayak out. And I don't know if it's simply my confidence or it's when I go into an area that I take the kayak into, I have a slightly different mentality. But it sure seems like when I go to a place that you can't just drive up to or walk in the woods somewhere, like you have to take a boat there. It seems like I've seen a lot more deer in places like that, a lot more sign, a lot more everything. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on this year, is focusing on less of that stuff that anybody can get to and focus more on the stuff that you have to take that extra step. And like I say, I believe it could be kind of 50-50 as to whether or not there's actually more deer in those areas, or if I just have a more hardcore mentality. I'm actually looking more and I'm actually paying attention more to what's actually there. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. But I think we're going to try to get to another spot and at least like glance in the woods for a minute. A couple things I wanted to mention real quick. We're about to go check this camera that I pulled. And also, I made it out to a spot and tried to walk in there, and I just felt a little uneasy because I'm wearing like boat shoes. And there's a ton of tracks on that riverbank, which a lot of early season deer in this area do walk the riverbanks. So it's a good sign that there's deer there. But I got all the way out there, got distracted by some crappie or white bass or wiper or something coming up and just blowing up on shad. And then this fish that was literally like 3.5 foot long that was up in the grass. Got distracted by all that, ran my kayak up on the shore a little bit too hard and ended up spinning my prop a little bit. So I tried to tighten it back down, but I couldn't reach it while I was out in the water and ended up having to paddle all the way back. But anyway, that's besides the point. The reason I wanted to check this camera right now is because it's been out for a while, and I never know exactly when to go out and check public land cameras, especially like if they're in what I assume to be a future bedding area or a current bedding area or anything that has to do with bedding. It's a little uneasy for me about going in there to check them. And but I felt like today was a good day because we've got a cold front. We had like the first little push of that cold front earlier, like literally while I was on my way down here. And then the main front is supposed to hit right about dark today. So I know that before a cold front, like the day before or 2 days before or something like that, I've seen a lot of activity then. So I felt like that might be one like high point in the activity. Also, when this cold front comes through and all that rain washes away my scent, that's just a good thing to have happen, is the rain come through and wash out your scent, kind of clear everything up for when the deer start moving again. And then also, obviously, cold fronts. It's like, even though it's cool right now, it's still like probably in the high 70s, mid 70s. And tomorrow and the next couple of days are going to be down into like the upper 50s at night, like upper to mid 50s. So we're getting a pretty good temperature drop, which I feel like next time I come back in here and check it, I'm going to have another spike right at the beginning of the card, basically. So I kind of rambled there for a second. I'm about to load up the kayak and we're going to get out of here, see what's on this camera.